Part 7. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 63. Mu Yangling hesitated for a moment. Auntie, if you bring me so much, your family will have no vegetables in winter. The great aunt smiled and said, my vegetable garden is big, and there are many more, so don't worry about it. Then she said, because I couldn't afford meat, I could only grow some vegetables. Even if I was hungry, eating these would still fill me up. Now that you bring us so much meat, I don't have to worry about it. Ma Ziyuheng tugged on Mu Yangling's clothes, and said in a low voice, cousin, you can pick it up, or my grandma will deliver it in person. My grandma said that your family has little food. It is true that the Mu family has few vegetables. After all, Xu Wanyang does not know how to farm. Even if she only grows a vegetable field, it is only enough for daily food. When it is time to store in the winter, Mu Shi can only go to the town to buy vegetables and store them back. And Mu Shi, he can only hoe the ground. Even if Lu Daqian taught him many times, the vegetables he grows are still half dead, but Xu Wanyang is better than him, but only a little bit. Therefore, although the Mu family had spare money, they never bought land like other families because they did not know how to plant. Mu Yangling didn't refuse any more, and took it. A smile appeared on Ma Liu's face, rolled up his sleeves and said, you play with your cousins first, and my aunt will cook something delicious for you. Then he went into the kitchen. Mu Yangling took his two cousins to play at the door and asked, is your field going to be taken back? Ma Ziyulan was ignorant, but Ma Ziyuheng nodded and said, Grandma said that in a few days, Uncle will come over to measure with the elders, and return the title deed when it's confirmed. Ma Ziyuheng looked at Mu Yangling gratefully. She was not as ignorant as her younger sister. On the contrary, because she was the eldest daughter and her parents died young, her grandmother liked to talk about everything in front of her, so she knew a lot of things. She knew how her grandpa's family and the people in the village bullied them, grandpa and grandson. She knew how grandma blamed her uncle for not being able to support the married daughter, and she also knew that life in their family slowed down because they ran into Mu's cousin in the town. For the better. The cousin brought her uncle and cousins to support them, and let the people in the village know that they are not helpless. Now she even came forward to ask the Lu family to take back the confiscated land for them. Ma Ziyuheng was only faintly grateful to Lu Daqian and the others, but to Mu Yangling, she was very grateful and wished to be a cow to her in the next life. However, Ma Ziyuheng only kept these emotions in her heart and did not express them. She knew that if her cousin found out, she would be embarrassed and frightened, and she might come less often in the future. Ma Ziyuheng likes Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling came with a full load and still returned with a full load. Seeing that she brought back so many vegetables, Xu Wanyang couldn't help laughing and said, it seems that your father doesn't have to go to town to buy vegetables this year. Mu Yangling wiped his sweat, nodded, took the things into the cellar, and said, that's right, and the dishes at my aunt's house are even better than those sold in the town. Mu Yangling put the vegetables in the cellar and arranged them. He climbed out and moved the slate over to cover it. He clapped his hands and said, okay, our family doesn't have to worry about vegetables this year. Widow Lu saw that Mu Yangling had so many vegetables from Zishan village, and thought that the Mu family would buy vegetables from the town every year, so she went home and picked up a load of large cabbages that could be harvested and brought them to Mu's house. Sister-in-law, I will give you something is coming. Xu Wanyang came out and saw this load of vegetables, a little startled, hesitantly asked, did Shitu and younger siblings buy vegetables? Didn't Mu Shi never buy things with the villagers? The last time I bought it in the village because the village was really difficult and the food in the town was expensive. Why do I even buy vegetables in the village now? Widow Lu took Xu Wanyang's hand and said, what are you buying? Some gadgets at home, for you to try out. You can ask Aling to carry them to the cellar, and you can eat them in winter. How can this be done? Xu Wanyang hurriedly declined, your family grows so many vegetables, How can we want you? Besides, you don't get paid for nothing. Hey, I don't understand what my sister-in-law said. I knew that Aling helped me. It's only been a month now, and Gowden has gained several caddies. You don't mind my lack of food. He dropped the things and walked out, and waved, remember to let Aling carry it to the cellar. Widow Lu did not hide her actions from the villagers. When Lu Dakian saw her, she asked her two daughter-in-laws to carry 2 baskets of vegetables, and other families followed suit. When Mu Yangling brought back his muddy younger brother from the outside, there were a lot of vegetables piled up in the yard, and Xu Wanyang was worrying about them. Seeing Mu Yangling coming back, Xu Wanyang quickly waved her hand and said, "Come here, Aling, and send all these things back to the villagers, otherwise your father will be angry again when he comes back." "Why are you angry?" Mu Yangling carried his younger brother across the vegetables in the yard and successfully reached his mother. He said nonchalantly, "Maybe he's happy, anyway, there's no need to buy vegetables." "What do you know, child?" Xu Wanyang knocked her head and said, "Your father said that he doesn't blame the villagers anymore, but he still has resentment in his heart, otherwise it wouldn't have been so many years with your uncle and the others. It's just a normal life, you took them into the mountains before, your father didn't say anything and let you mess around, it's our family's kindness, they accept it, now they send these things, it's different. I think it's good for us to accept these things, lest the villagers think we are soft and easy to talk to, and they will ask us for everything in the future." Although Mu Yangling wanted to help the villagers live a good life, he didn't want to raise them take their temper. She had heard too many stories about Shen Mi's kindness fighting against Mi's hatred, and her father had suffered from ingratitude, so she didn't intend to return the things. Xu Wanyang scolded, "I've only heard that you don't want to repay your kindness. Mother, if you don't get any rewards for your kindness, who will be full and have nothing to do after a long time? I am kind-hearted and responsible, so I help the villagers without expecting anything in return. But in this world, people like me, there are very few good people, so in order to allow more people to do good deeds and help others, we should accept the rewards we get from the kindness. Although it is less, it is a wish anyway. When others see that the kindness can gain something, they will encounter difficulties in the future. Someone who can help is sure to be happy to help." Xu Wanyang stared at her daughter with wide eyes. She never knew that her own daughter was such a thick-skinned person. It was inexplicable, but somewhat familiar. Xu Wanyang pondered, and when Mu Shi came back from the county the next day, Xu Wanyang finally remembered. She beat her husband and said angrily, "Who did I say Aling resembled? So it turned out that he resembled you." Mu Shi was puzzled. Xu Wanyang angrily explained what Mu Yangling said yesterday, and said, "This child is so thick-skinned, he speaks as if he is the most kind-hearted person in the world." But Mu Shi laughed loudly, and said, "Your daughter is right. The Mu family has always been kind-hearted and responsible. They treat their family members better. My lady, don't you think I am such a person?" Xu Wanyang blushed, stretched out her hand and twisted the flesh on Mu Shi's waist and turned it around. Mu Shi held his breath and didn't dare to cry out, he could only look at his wife beggingly. Xu Wanyang let out a cold snort, and then let go. Mu Shi exhaled, and said, "Aling is right, we take things, and give them away if there are too many. There are many people who can't afford food outside. If we don't accept them, we will take them once or twice. Forget it, I'm afraid the villagers will think that our Mu family helps them for granted. Forget it this year, the rabbits are infested, and I won't allow Aling to take them into the mountains again in the spring of next year." Mu Shi has long passed the age of enthusiasm for working for everyone's welfare, and his heart has hardened because of his betrayal back then. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 64. Mu Yangling woke up from the cold, and Xiao Bowen got into her arms. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw her brother's dark head. When she turned her head to look out the window, it was a white light. It's dawn now. Why doesn't she feel anything? Mu Yangling thought about it in a daze, and then he became agitated, and looked out the window with his eyes wide open. This is, Shui. Snowing. Mu Yangling quickly got up and shouted, "Father, Mother, get up quickly, it's snowing." Mu Yangling quickly took out a large thick quilt from the closet to cover his younger brother, then put on a cotton coat and went out. Mu Shi also woke up. He covered his wife with a quilt and came out. He saw the white flowers outside. The snow was already half a finger deep. "Father, is the snow so thick?" "It's only the end of September, and it's not winter yet," Mu Yangling shouted. Mu Shi looked gloomy at the heavy snow outside, and said, "The weather has changed. You go and put on some more clothes. Father is going to find the chief, and you have to tell everyone to get up, or you will freeze to death. The temperature has dropped sharply, and it is possible that you will not be able to wake up in your sleep, so you have to wake up people quickly." Mu Yangling hurried into the house to get dressed, and said, "Father, go quickly, I'll go find my uncle and ask him to wake up everyone in the village." Mu Shi nodded, and went into the room to change clothes. Xu Wanyang was sitting up under the quilt, worried. "Be careful on the road, the ground is slippery, don't worry." "I see, you can lie down quickly, you can't catch a cold. I will stop by the county in a while and get some medicine for you and Bowen. Both his wife and son are weak, and they will definitely get sick after catching a cold before." Mu Shi was a little worried. Mu Shi went out, but Mu Yangling woke up Xiao Bowen, who was still sleeping, took off his clothes and rubbed him all over. Seeing him crying loudly, he couldn't help comforting him. "If you have a fever, don't worry. All right, otherwise you will get sick and take bitter medicine." Seeing that his forehead was sweating, Mu Yangling wiped him dry with a dry towel, dressed him quickly, and carried him to Xu Wanyang with the quilt. "Mother, you and Bowen are warm, let's go to uncle first. Be careful, come back as soon as the notice arrives." Mu Yangling was worried that his mother and younger brother were alone at home, so he responded. Mu Yangling stepped on the snow wearing cloth shoes, and felt a chill in his heart. A chill went from the soles of his feet to his heart, and his whole body shrank. Because there is still more than half a month until the winter solstice, Mu Shi and Mu Yangling are not willing to let Xu Wanyang do too much needlework, so her leather boots for this year are not ready yet, but Mu Shi finished it 2 days ago. Mu Yangling can only wear cloth shoes now, but the leather boots from last year are still there, but it's a pity that many of them are broken. Mu Yangling ran to Lu Daqian's house with deep feet and shallow feet, knocked on the door bang bang, and shouted, "Uncle, uncle, get up quickly, it's snowing heavily." Seeing that there was no movement inside, Mu Yangling became worried, so he simply kicked the door and shouted, "Get up, it's snowing heavily, and you're going to freeze to death." Lu Ting and Lu Zhuang woke up in a daze. Seeing the white snow outside the window, they were startled. Lu Ting got up, shook Lu Zhao and shouted, get up, it's snowing heavily." Lu Zayashi's lips were blue from the cold, and her hands and feet were shaking when she got up. When Lu Ting saw her, she wrapped her in a quilt and shouted, "Go and see the 3 children, hurry up." Only then did Lu Zayashi wake up, hugging the quilt and rushing out to find the child. Lu Ting ran to knock on the door of his parents, and Lu Zhuang also ran out. Lu Ting shouted at him, "Go and open the door for a Ling," kicking the door of his parents with his feet. After kicking the door open, he saw that his parents were only covered, the quilt was thin, and his complexion was a little pale. He was shocked and rushed forward to rub their hands and feet. Mu Yangling also ran in, and shouted after seeing this, "Go to the and come in and rub their bodies, Uncle Chuang, take the gong and wake everyone up with me." The reason why Mu Yangling came to Liu's house was because the Liu's house had 2 gongs, and once it was struck, the whole village could hear it. Lu Ting took a quilt from the cabinet to cover his parents, and shouted at Lu Chuang, "Go and get something, I'm at home." Brother and sister, Go and bring the children here, and burn charcoal to keep them warm. Go and come in, lady, you get up in a single room separated by a cloth curtain, wipe your body for mother, and I will wipe for dad. Lu Zhuang and Mu Yangling brought out the gong together, knocking on it and shouting, "It's snowing, get up." Lu Zhuang knocked as he walked, while Mu Yangling stepped forward and slammed on the door, bang bang, not letting go of every house. It didn't take long for the village to be lit up, and people in most of the houses got up. There are still some widowed and lonely families in the village. Mu Yangling and Lu Zhuang called for anyone who was not awake to break into the door directly, wake them up, and then help them rub their bodies, lit a fire and boiled hot water. A young man from the village came to take over, "Go back and add some more clothes, we are here." "What about the other families in the village?" Lu Dazhuang said, "My father sent someone to go, you guys go back quickly." "Someone went to Gaodan's house?" Mu Yangling asked. "Don't worry, my sister-in-law took someone with her," Lu Dazhuang said. "Fortunately, you woke us up, otherwise we don't know when we will wake up." Only then did Mu Yangling feel relieved, and he went home after talking to Lu Zhuang. Now there were only mother and younger brother in the family, and Mu Yangling was also a little worried. When Mu Yangling came back, Xu Wanyang had already got up and was cooking porridge in the kitchen. Mu Yangling hurried forward to support her. "Mom, you are pregnant, why did you get out of bed? Your brother is very cold. I think he might be better off with a bowl of hot porridge. You should also eat a bowl of hot porridge to warm up." "I know, mother, you go back first, I'll watch the fire." Mu Yangling helped Xu Wanyang into the room, and then turned back to the kitchen. At this time, the whole world was white, but the clock in the room told her that it was only yin shi, but it was already as bright as daytime. Mu Yangling was a little worried about Mu Shi, wondering if he was safe on the road. Because of a heavy snowfall, 3 elderly people and 1 child died in the village. Before winter came, the village had already started to hold funerals. Lu He was very worried, and said to Lu Daqian, "I'm afraid it will be very cold this year, and I don't know if the elderly and children in the village can survive it." Lu Daqian frowned, "It's not winter yet." "Yeah, it's not winter yet." Lu He twisted the tobacco with trembling hands. The snow this year was so sudden that even he almost didn't survive. Mu Shi had already returned from the county seat. He notified the restaurants in the county seat that they might not be able to supply them with prey in the future. Shopkeeper Zhang of Biaoxiang Tower had no objection. Although Ziwixialo was dissatisfied, he also knew that this was a natural disaster and not Mu Shi's responsibility. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 65. The sky was gloomy. Mu Shi looked at the black clouds in the sky, and said to Mu Yangling, "I'm afraid it will snow again tomorrow, and I don't know what's going on with your aunt's house. Dad will get up early tomorrow and go to your aunt's house to have a look. By the way, clear the road in the mountains." "Father, it's dangerous to walk on the mountain road with such heavy snow." Mu Shi smiled slightly, touched her head and said, "The snow in the mountain is blocked by trees, and it is less than the snow outside. Even if the mountain road is difficult, Dad has experience. Don't worry, you won't fall." Mu Yangling glanced back at Xu Wanyang, and said in a low voice, "Father, then you have to come back quickly, my mother has been a little restless these days." Mu Shi also looked back at his wife. The day of giving birth is about a month away. I don't know if the sudden change in the weather made Wanyang feel uncomfortable. She always frowned these 2 days and couldn't sleep at night. Mu Shi didn't dare to leave home for too long, so he said, "Don't worry, Dad will be back soon. If your mother is not feeling well, you can go to uncles and grandmas and ask them to come and help." Having said that, Shi didn't want to hand over his wife to others, so he got up the next day while Xu Wanyang was still sleeping, got dressed, didn't eat breakfast, and went straight to Zishan village. It took Mu Yangling 3/4 of an hour to cross the mountain, and Mu Shi only walked for 3/4 of an hour when the snowy road was difficult to walk. When he arrived at Zishan village, he saw Ma Liu's house. Cooled down. Half of the house on the left side of Ma's house was crushed by the snow. Zai Yuheng's 2 children were wearing cotton jackets around the brazier, but there was wind leaking from one side. Mu Shi searched around but didn't see Mrs. Ma Liu. His eyes sank, he strode into Ma's house. Zai Yuheng, where's your grandma? Ma Zai Yuheng raised her head in surprise, and shouted with red eyes, cousin. When Ma Zai Ulan saw Mu Shi, she cried wow. Zai Yuheng wiped her tears and said, Grandma went to the village head, our house collapsed. Grandma went to the village head yesterday, and asked everyone to help build a house, but the village head said that many houses in the village are in ruins. There was a disaster, and I couldn't take care of my family for the time being. Last night we sat around the brazier all night, and Grandma didn't let us go to sleep. At dawn, Grandma went to find the village chief. The village chief of Zishan village is also the patriarch of the Ma family. Mu Shi is well aware of the Ma family's diabolical nature. Besides, every household was indeed affected by the snowstorm. Linshan village is because of the presence of Lu He, who takes the family as his own responsibility, and the most important thing is reputation, which is why he often puts his own family last and helps others to overcome difficulties first. The patriarch of the Ma family does not have these virtues. The most important thing is that Lu He has the prestige of being unambiguous in Linshan village. The patriarch of the Ma family thought that Ma Degi dared to point at the nose of the head of the Ma family and curse. Mu Shi did not think they could help Degi. Ant builds a house. Judging by the weather, there might be another heavy snowfall this afternoon or evening. If they really stayed overnight in such a house, even if they stayed awake, they would be seriously ill if they didn't die. Mu Shi said, clean up, my cousin will take you back to my house. Zai Yuheng's eyes lit up, but then dimmed again, and said, I don't know if Grandma will agree. You just take out all the things at home, and I will talk to your grandma later. Ma Zai Yuheng knew where her valuables were, and Ma Liashi was old, and she was afraid that she would go there one day, so she told her eldest granddaughter where the money and land deeds were hidden at home. The Ma family only had these few valuable things, and their food and clothes and the bacon sent by Mu Yangling earlier. Ma Zai Yuheng took all these things into a large pannier, and when Ma Liashi came back, she had almost packed them. Go to live at your house. Ma Liu's eyes widened, glanced at the 2 granddaughters, nodded after a moment of hesitation, and said, okay, it's just that there are so many things at home, and I can't take them all at once. For the rest, the Ma family's food was piled up in the house, and Mu Shi would definitely not be able to carry it. Mu Shi laughed and said, Auntie, why don't you store the food here first, and after a while, my cousins and I will come and help you fix the house when the clan gets their hands on it. Ma Liashi wiped away her tears and nodded with a sob, okay, I'll listen to you. Ma Lu took 2 wild rabbits to find Ma Zhang, and asked their family to help keep the food at home. Mrs. Ma Zhang has benefited a lot from Mu Yangling during this time. Seeing that Mrs. Ma Lu was accompanied by Mu Shi and seeing her bring things over, she was naturally willing, so she immediately called her man to bring the food with Mu Shi. Several nearby houses were invited to testify. Mu Shi is very strong, and it is enough to go back and forth a few times. He was worried about his wife, so he transported the food to Ma Zhang's house, and said to Ma Lu, Auntie, let's go. Go from the mountain. Ma Lu looked at the white snow on the trees on the mountain. I'm holding 2 children, Auntie don't worry, nothing will happen. Their big back basket was not full, and Mu Shi put Zai Ulan in the back bag directly. Although she was 7 years old, she looked like her. It's the same size as a blog post, so it fits just right in the pannier. Mushi told Xiaolin, hold on to the ropes on both sides of the basket tightly for a while, don't be afraid, tell grandma and cousin if you have anything, you know. Xiaolin nodded cautiously. Mushi wanted to hug Ziyuheng, but Ziyuheng said, cousin, I can walk by myself. Mushi didn't force himself, he directly supported Malayashi and Ziyuheng from left to right and walked forward. When the road was narrow, he leaned sideways to help them down. They were all a little embarrassed, but fortunately they came out after only walking for more than half an hour. Seeing that their lips were blue from the cold, Mushi said, let's go home quickly, so you can warm up too. There are 5 rooms in the Mu family, except for the one in the middle which is used as the main room, the one on the left where Mu Shi and Xu Wanyang lived, the one on the right where Mu Yangling and Xiao Bowen lived, and the other one was piled up with sundries, and the remaining one was for use to spare. Xu Wanyang originally planned to move Xiao Bowen out of the room in the spring of next year and live in a room alone. Their siblings are getting older, and it is not appropriate to live together anymore. So that room was very clean, the Kong and quilts were already made, and the grandparents and grandchildren could live in it with a little tidying up. Mu Yangling boiled hot water in the kitchen to warm them up, you guys will feel comfortable after taking a bath in a while. Ma Ziyuheng shrank back in shame, and said in a low voice, thank you, cousin. Mu Yangling glanced at her soaked shoes and pudding-covered padded coat, and said with a smile, cousin, why don't you come and help me light the fire, I'm not very good at housework. Ma Ziyuheng said happily, okay, cousin go to rest, I'll light the fire. Ma Ziyuheng pulled her sister to squat in the kitchen to light the fire. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 66. It was the first time for Xiao Bowen to meet 2 cousins, especially Ma Xiaolin who was about the same age as him, so when they first arrived, he followed Ma Xiaolin back and forth. Mu Yangling let the 3 of them stay in the kitchen, and went into the house by herself to find her old clothes and boots. Mu Yangling grows up fast, and has to change clothes almost every year. Except for the most difficult years when the clothes need to be recycled. At other times, Mu Shi and Xu Wanyang are unwilling to wrong their 2 children. They make 2 new sets of cotton clothes every year. And most of last year stayed. Ma Ziyuheng and Ma Xiaolin are much smaller than Mu Yangling, so they can wear her clothes from the past few years, even the boots are ready-made. Mu Yangling found 3 or 4 sets of clothes for them, and said, go take a shower and change, and I'll make you some hot food. Holding the clothes, Ma Ziyuheng murmured, thank you cousin. Mu Yangling just smiled. Over there Malayashi has also changed clothes and is sitting in the room talking with Xu Wanyang. In just half a day, the grandparents and grandchildren settled down at Mu's house. Xu Wanyang was about to give birth, and with Ma Liu's presence, Mu Shi and Mu Yangling felt much more at ease. The entire Mingshui County was under the snowstorm, and people kept freezing to death. In just 5 days, Mu Shi took Mu Yangling to the town to deliver goods, and he saw funeral bearers along the way. Father, will it be colder in winter? Wouldn't more people die by then? Mu Shi was silent, he didn't have much time to worry about others, what he worried about was his wife and the child in her belly. The weather is cold, newborns are easy to die, and Xu Wanyang's health has always been poor. Mu Shi is very worried about giving birth in such a cold weather. But in Xieying, Qi Ziyuan and the others had another kind of worry. It has been snowing for 2 days in a row, and the snow outside is as thick as a finger, Qi Ziyuan said worriedly, I'm afraid the snow in the north will be even greater. Zhang Ziyi didn't understand, General, what does it have to do with us whether there is a disaster in the north? Anyway, the barbarians have occupied that area. Qi Ziyuan picked up the book on the desk and hit him on the head, that is the world of my great Zhou, even if it is now occupied by barbarians, the people there are still the people of my great Zhou, don't let me hear it again these words. Rong Xian also said, what's more, the disaster in the north is serious, and I'm afraid it will be even worse on the grasslands. If they don't have enough food, they may come south to invade, and then Xingyuan Mansion will bear the brunt. This is exactly what I'm worried about, Qi Ziyuan said. If barbarians go south, we must be the first in the western camp, but the defense line to the east around Mount Chu is too long, we're afraid we won't be able to take care of it. Qi Ziyuan looked at his capable general and said, so, I want to redraw the patrol route. Even if I can't stop the barbarians going south at the first time, I still have to send the news as soon as possible so that we can rush to help as soon as possible. The rearrangement needs the consent of Suanfu envoy Rong Xian didn't think that this matter could be achieved so easily, so he said, General, if the defense is changed in order to prevent the Hu people from attacking from the area of Chushan, the application has been completed at this time. That's too late. So I decided to cut it first and then play it. The general will be outside, and the king's order will not be accepted. Rong Xian, you should immediately draft a document and report the change of defense in detail to the Suanfu envoy. I will start to deploy the defense here. Zhang Ziyi asked for orders immediately. General, let the subordinates lead the team. But Rong Xian didn't agree with Qi Ziyuan's outrageous behavior, and said, General, if the Xianfu envoy uses this as an excuse to punish you. Qi Ziyuan snorted coldly. He dare not. Qi Ziyuan said to himself, who else can he ask to guard the northwest? Rong Xian suddenly realized, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, but he felt a little sad in his heart. Qi Ziyuan was very strong, he was happy, but he was useless in the court, and thinking about the current situation, Rong Xian suddenly felt that his country was not far away. The Suanfu envoy of Lizhu Road was a civil servant, and he was the emperor's confidant. The emperor always gave way to the outside world, so the relationship between Qi Ziyuan and others and the Suanfu envoy was not good. Zhang Ziyi said proudly, General, let the subordinates lead the troops to inspect the area of Chushan. If the barbarians dare to come, the subordinates will let them come and never come back, and let the Suanfu envoy see if we can defeat them Hu people. Rong Xian glanced at him sideways, and said with a smile, I'm afraid that Xianfushi is not afraid that you will lose to the barbarian, but that you will win the barbarian. Zhang Ziyi was simple-minded, and stared at the words, why? Shouldn't you be happy when you win a battle? Why? Both Qi Ziyuan and Rong Xian smiled sarcastically, because winning a battle means expanding the war. If De Zhou loses, they only need to pay some land and gold, silver, and silk cloth. But if the Hu people lose, the Hu people will become angry. The people on the Dazhu side will also want to take back their homeland, and the war between the two sides will expand. With the expansion of the war, the court's expenditures such as military pay, food, and grass will increase. De Zhou has been extravagant for more than 20 years, and he can no longer afford war. Now the imperial court can only provide food and grass for the soldiers, but there is no military salary promised to the soldiers. Even Qi Ziyuan has not received the military salary for half a year. Now the soldiers of each army are trying to solve it themselves, and Qi Ziyuan's method is nothing more than expropriating the local people and seconding the wealthy households. Why did the Yuan Jiajin only recognize the Yuan family, but not the current sage? Because the Yuan family is raising them, they are called Yuan Jiajin and only recognize the Yuan family. The more victories and battles, the more military achievements and prestige, the emperor will naturally be afraid. That's why Yuan's army was so taboo, and was forcibly recalled by the emperor during the recovery battle 4 years ago. Will be lost. Therefore, Qi Ziyuan had to kill first and play later, because he was afraid that if he wrote the letter now, the Xianfu envoy would make him stick to the west camp and not attack back, so as not to hurt the diplomatic relations between the two countries. Qi Ziyuan and Rong Xian agreed to call everyone to make arrangements the next day. Mo Xiong was puzzled and asked, General, the north of our Xingyuan mansion is Jingzhou mansion, and the area around Jingzhou mansion is much richer than ours. Even if the disaster over there is more severe than ours, and the emaciated camels are bigger than the horses, it should be us poor people who are going to snatch them. The prosperity of Jingzhou Mansion happened 4 years ago. The barbarians were not good at planting. They occupied the farmland and enclosed it to plant grass and raise horses. In the past 4 years, the people have suffered untold hardships. Now the snowstorm is the most difficult thing for them. The Hu people can't squeeze out any oil and water from there, and in order to deal with the snowstorm on the grassland, they must go south to plunder. Qi Ziyuan looked at the crowd and said, "So, the defense must start as soon as possible, and it is precisely for this reason that we called everyone here today. Most of the land of the Great Zhou has been lost, and it must not be lost again, otherwise we will all become sinners through the ages." As soon as Qi Ziyuan said this, everyone immediately stood up and cupped their fists and said, "The last general is willing to follow the general to defend the country and protect my Great Zhou." The author has something to say. I am in a very bad state today. I wrote and deleted, and wrote again. This chapter is very difficult. The next few chapters are considered excessive, so it is a bit difficult to write. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 67. Brother, I also want to go on patrol with Zhang Ziyi, Qi Heiran shouted and rushed into Qi Ziyuan's study. Qi Ziyuan has never told Qi Heiran that the matter of patrolling is confidential. How could he know? Qi Ziyuan asked, "Who said Zhang Ziyi was on patrol?" Qi Heiran tilted his head, "Isn't it? But today I went to the 3rd Battalion and found that half of the elites had been transferred away, and scouts from the 1st and 2nd Battalions had been transferred to Zhang Ziyi's command. Isn't there a war going to happen?" Qi Heiran looked at his eldest brother dissatisfied and said, "Brother, you can't leave me to fight by yourself, I will go with you too." Qi Heiran poked his neck and said with red eyes, "If you leave me alone, I will snatch the battlefield by myself." Qi Ziyuan was furious immediately, held down Qi Heiran and spanked his ass. "What are you doing on the battlefield? Are you dying? You are only 12 years old this year." He slapped him as he spoke. Qi Heiran shouted while struggling, "Why can't I fight? I can do 120 moves under your command now. Didn't you say that you don't have enough soldiers under your command? Why don't you give me dozens of people? Now that it's snowing heavily, those barbarians will definitely go south to plunder." Qi Ziyuan paused, pulled the man up, and asked with a serious expression, "How do you know that the Hulu will definitely go south to plunder?" Although Qi Ziyuan rearmed, it was just a precautionary measure. "Not sure, but what Qi Heiran said seems to be absolutely sure that the barbarians will definitely go south." Qi Heiran took it for granted, "If I were a Huron, I would definitely go south. I could get food for the winter and weaken the military strength of the Great Zhou. Maybe I could win a few battles and get compensation from the Great Zhou. Porcelain and silk bulletin, with so many benefits, why didn't I go south? The reason is ready-made, the snowstorm needs more supplies, and the Hu People's Court must be willing to let soldiers go south to try." Qi Ziyuan looked at his younger brother in surprise. His younger brother seems to be only 12 years old this year, right? He looks stupid and cute at ordinary times, but 8 out of 10 sentences he doesn't understand when he reads. Every time he checks his homework, his husband has to sue him. Qi Ziyuan remembered that Rong Xian once praised Qi Heiran's ability to train soldiers, and he gathered the miscellaneous soldiers from the 4th Battalion in just 1 month. Qi Ziyuan seriously considered his younger brother's future, so he didn't even think about letting him take the imperial examination. Even he couldn't bear to look at the article when it was written, let alone those knowledgeable examiners. Then he could only go along the road from Wu. Qi Ziyuan looked at his immature younger brother, feeling a little bit embarrassed. Going to the battlefield is equivalent to handing over half his life to God. Qi Ziyuan didn't want his younger brother to live such a life of licking blood. But besides joining martial arts, what else could Qi Heiran do? Qi Ziyuan suddenly felt that he was too incompetent to be the eldest brother. His younger brother was already 12, but he hadn't determined the future direction for his younger brother. Chi Xiaoyuan asked him, "Have you thought about your future?" Chi Heiran said, "As a matter of course I am going to be a general by my brother's side. Big brother, when you become a Suanfu envoy, I will go to be a general under you." Chi Xiaoyuan laughed loudly when he heard the words, and said loudly, "If elder brother can really be a Suanfu envoy, I will definitely transfer you, a general, under my command." The Suanfu envoy is a first-rank official. How many people in the world can reach this position? Chi Xiaoyuan only took this as a joke, but Chi Heiran was serious. At this time, he was at the stage where he admired his elder brother the most. He felt that his elder brother was simply the most capable person in the world. Father is much stronger. Okay, you can go back first, and I will transfer you to my subordinates after the elder brother becomes the Xianfu envoy. Chi Heiran jumped up when he heard the words, "Brother, you can't change the subject. After you become the Suanfu envoy, I will be a general under your hands. Now that you are a general, I will be a small flag under your hands. Just give me a few people, and I will take them to patrol, brother, I beg you." Chi Heiran almost jumped on Chi Xiaoyuan to act like a spoiled child. Chi Xiaoyuan said with a straight face, "You have no military achievements and experience, how can you be qualified for the position of Xiaoqi? Don't mess around, if word spreads, I will be accused of favoritism." Chi Heiran rolled his eyes and said, "Brother, just lie to me, how many generals in each army don't stuff their own people in it? Brother Rongxian can't even stop me with 3 punches, you can't do it because you protect him, from the military division." Chi Xiu stared at him from a distance. "What nonsense are you talking about? Your elder brother Rongxian is extremely smart, and he relies on his own ability. The army is not only about being smart. If you don't have force, no matter how smart you are, you can't get out of the battlefield alive. Brother, you can't just show favoritism to your friends and not to your younger brother." Chi Heiran hugged Chi Xiaoyuan crying. Chi Xiaoyuan was helpless, and said, "You are too young, the generals in the army will not be convinced. Brother, give me the miscellaneous soldiers from the 4th Battalion. They won't have any objections, right?" Chi Heiran looked at his brother with tears in his eyes. Chi Xiaoyuan was silent for a moment, and said, "The death rate of the miscellaneous soldiers in the 4th Battalion has always been high, and you will be very dangerous if you take them." Chi Heiran patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, brother, I will definitely save my own life, so just give me the general banner of the 4th Battalion." Chi Xiaoyuan frowned slightly, "Didn't you just say Xiaoqi? But that's the 1st Battalion, the 2nd Battalion and the 3rd Battalion. If it's the 4th Battalion, you have to give me a general banner anyway." Chi Heiran chuckled. "The 4th Battalion is the old, weak, sick and disabled eliminated by each battalion, or the poor soldiers who were eliminated after the recruits failed to pass the training. Each army has a battalion specially filled with these people, which are used as cannon fodder." After all, Chi Xiaoyuan's heart wasn't hard enough. He didn't push those who would die on the battlefield, and only let them be responsible for logistics and some messy work. Of course, the treatment was also the worst. But no matter how soft-hearted Chi Xiaoyuan is, when there is a big battle, they must also go to the battlefield. Soldiers should die on the battlefield. The next war may not happen, and if it happens, people from the 4th Battalion may not be used. Chi Xiaoyuan agreed after thinking about it. It is good to let his younger brother go there to grind his temper. If he really wants to drag the 4th Battalion into the battlefield, he just take him out again. Chi Heiran got what he wanted, and left happily. Fan Zijian squatted outside the yard waiting for him. When Chi Heiran saw him, he jumped over and asked, "Why are you here?" "Wait for you." Fan Zijian got up and patted his clothes, and said, "Seeing how happy you are, my cousin agreed to let you lead the troops on patrol." "That's right." Chi Heiran proudly patted him on the shoulder and said, brother is also a person with errands now, and I am the general flag now. Fan Zijan sneered, then immediately restrained his expression, and saluted solemnly, then cousin, I, a military advisor, salute you. Fan Zijan bit the word cousin fiercely. Chi Heiran was dumbfounded and said, what military advisor? Fan Zijan glanced at him sideways, and said, anyone who is a great general has a like-minded military advisor by his side. General Yuan has Shen Mu by his side, and cousin Rong Xian by his side. Who is by your side? For you to go further in the future, by the way, I'll do my best to be your military advisor. Chi Heiran's eyes widened, is this how to use like for like? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 68. After his younger brother left, Chi Ziyuan began to ponder. Since his younger brother could guess his defense from his deployment, could others also be able to? Chi Ziyuan found Rong Xian, and Rong Xian pondered for a moment and said, it's unlikely, the news of each battalion is actually closed, so Heiran and Zijan can have access to this information at the same time. No matter what, we should be more careful, Chi Ziyuan said, the deployment has not been completed yet, so there must be no accidents. Rong Xian got up immediately, I'll go and tell them to be more careful, and the personnel assigned to patrol must keep secret. Chi Ziyuan nodded. It's just that none of them expected that the problem would directly arise internally. One of Chi Ziyuan's confidants, Lu Chang, hadn't completed the defense, and Chi Ziyuan's documents had already been secreted before the Xuanfu envoy case. The Xianfu envoy directly sent a supervising army to Chi Ziyuan, and an elite soldier from the general banner who escorted the supervising army also stayed in Xingzhou mansion. Chi Ziyuan's expression turned ugly. Lu Cheng betrayed me, why? He thought he was good to the people below. Lu Cheng had been with him 3 years ago. His mother was seriously ill, and his salary was not enough to see a doctor. He gave him silver taels and medicinal materials. Lu Cheng was also grateful to him. After saving him from a stab, he really couldn't understand why Lu Cheng betrayed him. The people sitting below bowed their heads in silence. Rong Xian told them to step back, patted Chi Ziyuan on the shoulder, and said, there must be more benefits, but no matter what it is for, the most important thing at this time is the countermeasure. Chi Ziyuan's aura became sharper, his eyes falcon-like. The original defense is no longer necessary, but people still need to send people to patrol the area of Chushan. They want to restrain me with a supervising army and a general flag, which is too underestimating. I am far away. Huang Jian said that the imperial court is negotiating marriage with Jingguo, and our imperial court may send the princess to make a marriage. The Xianfu envoy will not allow us to destroy the diplomatic relations between the two countries, Rong Xian said. Chi Ziyuan was so angry that his liver ached. I sent a few princesses to the kingdom of Jin. Did they think that if the princesses were sent there, the Jin soldiers would not come over? Hu Han can't give birth to a family, let alone a princess who married to the kingdom of Jin. If there is no child, even if it is really born to ascend the throne, it is also a barbarian, not a Han. Rong Xian frowned slightly, and couldn't help saying, the marriage still has some effect. Chi Ziyuan sneered, of course it works. With the dowry brought by the princess, the barbarians will be able to settle down for at least a year or two. Chi Xiufar disagreed with the act of marriage. In a great country, but he had to sacrifice the princess in exchange for a few years of surviving. It would be better to fight vigorously. If he lost, he would die with dignity. It's just that the Wen of the Great Zhou was strong and the military was weak. Every time a major battle was defeated, princesses were sent out for marriage. Not only did Jin have marriage princesses, Xia, Tubo, and Ziliao all had princesses of the Great Zhou. During the 10 years after the imperial court fled south, The emperor, because there are no princesses of the right age, almost all of them use the princesses of the clan or the daughters of important officials in the court as princesses to send out marriages. However, no matter whether it is a real princess or a conferred princess, no one can live beyond the age of 25. No son or daughter was born in his life. 1 or 2 Qiziyuan can be regarded as an accident, but all the married princesses have no heirs left. Qiziyuan felt sad for the married princesses, and even more indignant, his princess who was a golden branch and a jade leaf was actually bullied in another country in this way. It is almost impossible for Qiziyuan to temporarily retreat from the edge of the kingdom of Jin in order to promote the peace between the two countries. He wished to destroy the peace and at least save one princess from dying in vain. What's more, his camp is here. It is his soldiers, the people under this rule. He and the soldiers robbed the people here for food and food. Let him watch the people being looted. How beastly is he, Qiziyuan? So Qiziyuan told Rongxian with certainty, you don't have to worry about this matter, we only lower the standard of defense. If Huang Jian dares to stop, let him come to me. Then what about Lu Chang? Qiziyuan pondered for a moment, and said, let him continue to serve as his captain. Rongxian raised his eyebrows, you won't deal with him. Qiziyuan raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and said coldly, he just skipped me and reported some situations to the procuratorate. That's not a crime. Besides, I really want to know if he will come to explain to me. For traders, sometimes stillness is more difficult than movement. Rongxian said no more. Lu Cheng didn't come to Qiziyuan to explain, and Qiziyuan didn't bother him, but Qi Heiran put him in a sack and beat Lu Cheng on the way home, and Lu Cheng went away the next day with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Barracks. When Fan Zijin heard about it, he kicked Qi Heiran angrily, and shouted, why do you still hit him in the face when you beat someone? You already know how to put a sack on him, why don't you just stare at his painful and inconspicuous place and beat him? Qi Heiran shouted, who said I didn't hit him where it hurts? I dare say he must have suffered internal injuries now. Then you can't punch him in the face, he has that face. People who don't know think it was ordered by the elder brother. Fan Zijin sneered, cousin still wants to give him a chance to explain, but I think he has no intention of repenting at all. If he really feels ashamed, he should recuperate at home, find an excuse to ask for leave, and hang around in the army with such a face, because he is afraid that others will not know that you beat him. Qi Heiran jumped up and said, how would others know that I beat him? I've got a sack. You are so stupid. Fan Zijin patted him on the head, and said bitterly, brother Zhang Ziyi is so angry that people spread the news about Lu Cheng's betrayal of his cousin. Now, whoever is above the general banner doesn't like it, knowing that Lu Cheng had offended his cousin, it was regarded as a feud. At this time, Lu Cheng was beaten with a sack, and everyone knew that it was to vent his anger on his cousin. The Xingzhou mansion can put a sack for his cousin, except who else do you have? Those who know say that you love your brothers and don't like betrayal people. Those who don't know think that you are domineering and arrogant, relying on your cousin's power to do whatever you want, and there are some people with sinister intentions. Brother ordered you to do this. Qi Heiran didn't expect so many twists and turns, his head became dizzy for a moment. Then what do you think? You are injured, and you are seriously injured. From today onwards, you should stay in bed, Fan Zijin said solemnly. What did you say? Qi Heiran's eyes widened. My lord hasn't even lost a single hair, why was he seriously injured? Don't damage my prestige, just relying on Lu Cheng's hands can't hurt me. Fan Zijin glanced at him, and said slowly, I said you are sick. If you are sick, just lie down for me honestly. Then he turned around and asked people to find 3 good doctors in the city with great fanfare. He stayed in the general's mansion to see a doctor for Qiziyuan. He himself took out a piece of ginger and wiped it vigorously with his sleeve, and then wiped his eyes, which immediately turned red. When Fan Zijin raised his head again, he looked sad and indignant. The servants of the two were stunned, but Chi Heiran was already used to it. Whenever Fan Zijian showed this expression, it meant that someone was going to be in trouble. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 69. Sure enough, Fan Zijian took two young men to the barracks to stop Lu Cheng, and scolded him, "My cousin is young and ignorant, so he will be upset when he hears the rumors outside. It's his fault for taking action against you, but after all, you are a few years older than him, and you have seen blood on the battlefield, so you can just teach him a lesson. Why bother to strike so hard?" Lu Cheng's face was sinking like water. He looked at Fan Zijian gloomily, and said, "I don't understand what Mr. Fan said. When did the fourth young master bother me?" Fan Zijian snorted coldly. "You know if you're looking for it or not," he said while staring at the wound on his face. "You don't have to pretend to be pitiful with this appearance. If something really happens to my cousin Guangfeng Ji, you won't give you little shoes to wear, but I must seek justice for my cousin." As he spoke, he glared at Lu Cheng viciously, then flung his sleeves and left. Lu Cheng felt even more gloomy. He was really seriously injured. Chi Heiran was good at martial arts, and he had learned internal skills since he was a child. With anger in his heart, he was merciless when he struck. Even if he tried to avoid it, he still suffered a lot of injuries. He originally planned to put on this appearance and pretend nothing happened, and wait until everyone guessed that Chi Heiran was the one to do it before revealing his serious injury. Even if Chi Ziyuan said that he didn't know about it, the soldiers in the army would definitely not believe it. Chi Ziyuan's prestige has declined, and if he does a few more things in the future, even if the Xianfu envoy wants to replace the general in the future, the soldiers will not have too many opinions, so he can subdue everyone faster. Unexpectedly, all of this was ruined by Fan Zijian. He ran out to say these words. Everyone knew that he had hurt Chi Heiran. In order to show his unspeakable gentleness, he insisted that he was just suffering skin trauma. Now that he said that he was injured internally, no one would believe Fan Zijian's words. Besides, he didn't dare to say it again. Saying it at this time was equivalent to admitting that he had bad intentions. Lu Cheng gritted his teeth. Rong Xian, who rushed over to watch the excitement, heaved a sigh of relief, and said with a smile to Zhang Ziyi beside him, "This Mr. Fan is quick-witted, no wonder the general agreed to him to be the military advisor of the fourth young master." Zhang Ziyi laughed and said, "Mr. Fan is just like you, with 18 twists in his heart." Rong Xian looked at Zhang Ziyi with a smile, and said softly, "Thank you for your compliment, don't worry, I have one more Ben than him." Zhang Ziyi wanted to sew his mouth shut, and looked at Rong Xian pleadingly, "Military master, this subordinate is praising you." "Oh," Rong Xian looked at him with a half-smile, "I thank you for your compliment." Zhang Ziyi looked at Rong Xian with tears in his eyes. He really praised the military master for being smart. When Chi Ziyuan heard this from the guard, he smashed the table angrily, and asked the guard gloomily, "You said Lu Cheng injured Heiran." The personal guard hurriedly waved his hand and said, "General, don't worry, I went to the mansion to see it in person just now. The fourth young master was not injured, but was detained in the yard by Mr. Fan, and the doctor who was invited was arranged to live in a side courtyard of the mansion." Chi Ziyuan's face looked better now. Lu Cheng wanted to replace him. Chi Ziyuan didn't blame him. As long as there is a chance, who wouldn't want to be a general? He also wanted to take Suan Fushi and replace him. But Lu Chengqian shouldn't have moved his mind to Chi Heiran, and if he wants to step on Chi Heiran to take the position, it depends on whether he agrees or not. In Chi Ziyuan's heart, there is only Chi Heiran as a relative. How could he tolerate Lu Cheng using him? Originally, I wanted to hear Lu Cheng's explanation, but now I don't need it. Let Heiran stay at home and rest for a few days, and then go to the fourth camp after a while. I will arrange someone else to do the patrol." The guard said, "General, where is Huang Jianjun?" Treat each other with courtesy, don't worry about the rest, I would like to know his attitude. The supervising army sent by the Suanfu envoy may not be of the same mind as the Suanfu envoy. Xinzhou Mansion is not a good place, and its hardships are much higher than Xinyuan Mansion. How many officials in the court are willing to come here? The waves in Xinzhou Prefecture were turbulent, but Linshan village slowly recovered from the grief, and life began to get on the right track. Several funerals in the village were finished, and everyone stayed at home because of the cold weather. Because the weather suddenly became cold, some of the vegetables left in the vegetable field were still not recovered. They were frozen by the snow and lost half of them. Although they were recovered on the third day, there may not be many preserved. Fortunately, they had stored a lot of bacon before, and the autumn harvest was considered a bumper harvest. As long as the supply of firewood could keep up, this winter should not be difficult. At this time, Mu Yangling was sitting on a small stool around the brazier. From time to time, he put a few peanuts beside the brazier, and put a few skewers of meat on it. The aroma of meat wafted out, and the three children sitting around he couldn't help but swallowed. Little Bowen looked at the meat skewers on the brazier with bright eyes and asked, "Sister, how long can I eat?" "Wait a little longer." Mu Yangling nimbly turned over the skewers. "Go and ask Dad if he wants to eat." Little Bowen struggled and said, "If Dad eats too, it's definitely not enough." Xiaolin also looked at the 20 or so meat skewers worriedly, while Ziyuheng said, "My cousin is going to go to the mountains, luckily it's hard, let's give it to my cousin. There is more. If Dad eats it, let him pick out the rest of the rabbit meat. I can roast meat very quickly." Mu Yangling is enthusiastic. Lama Shi came in and wanted to order him to work. Mu Yangling is not good at picking meat. After working all morning, he could only pick out such a small amount of diced meat, but Mu Shi has a good knife skill, and he can clean up a rabbit with 3 strokes, 5 cuts, and 2. Mu Yangling just wanted his father to carve out meat for him. Immediately, Ziyuheng sensed her cousin's thoughts, and volunteered, "I'll ask my cousin to come over to eat meat skewers." Ziyuheng ran to look for her cousin. Shu Wanyang and Malayashi were here. Ziyuheng was also clever, and shouted, "Cousin, auntie, do you want some meat skewers? Cousin has grilled a lot of meat skewers." Shu Wanyang smiled and shook her head, "My cousin won't eat it, you 4 can eat it." Mu Shi also said, "Eat it, my cousin won't eat it, so bring some skewers to your grandmother." "I don't want to eat it. If it's boiled, I can't eat it. I can't eat it." "Your sister and cousin are still young. Watch them and don't let them eat too much, so as not to get angry." Mu Shi's heart moved, and he asked, "How many skewers have you roasted?" Ziyuheng couldn't count, so she could only say, "My cousin said there are more than 20 strings." Mu Shi raised his eyebrows. 20 or so strings are not enough to fit your cousin's teeth," he said to Shu Wanyang. "It must be that child Aling who wants me to pick meat for them." Shu Wanyang pushed him, and said, "Then why don't you go quickly? That kid Aling is naughty. What if he takes your knife out and accidentally hurts you?" Mu Shi's dagger was passed down to him by his father, and from his warrior grandfather. That dagger cuts iron like mud, and it cannot be bought with money. Mu Shi always took it with him when he went in and out of the mountains and forests. Mu Yangling was greedy for a long time, but Mu Shi didn't allow her to use it. Shu Wanyang was even more afraid that she would hurt her, so she didn't allow her to touch it. But if Mu Shi didn't go, the kid might run away and steal it on the grounds that the kitchen knife wasn't sharp enough. The author has something to say. Suddenly the battery went out. I wrote it with great difficulty and didn't save it, and lost 500 words. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 70. Mu Yangling and the others used fresh rabbit meat for their barbecue. The weather was cold at this time, and there was thick snow on the ground. Mu Shi and Mu Yangling had stopped hunting in the mountains, but the traps that could have been set up were still there. In 3 or 2 days, the father and daughter will go into the mountains together, just to see if they are lucky enough to catch prey in these traps. If there is, they can have a fresh meal. If not, they will eat bacon and dried meat. Jerky. Most of the people who fell into the trap were wild rabbits. So far, Mu Yangling has only met one roe deer. Unfortunately, Mu Shi sent it to a restaurant in the town and didn't keep it for his family. That's why Mu Yangling used rabbit meat. Make skewers. In the past few days, Mu Yangling has invented many ways to eat rabbit meat. She is not very good at cooking, but she has many ideas, such as dicing rabbit meat, mashing it into meatballs, putting it in broth. In the past, Xu Wanyang pampered them and helped them cook all kinds of delicious food. Now Xu Wanyang is inconvenient, but she has Malayashi. The dicing and smashing of the rabbit meat is done by Mu Yangling. She has great strength and endurance, and she doesn't mind pounding it all morning. Put the broth in. They ate this dish last night, and even Xu Wanyang, who never liked to eat wild rabbits, also ate a small bowl. Not to mention the two carnivores Mu Yangling and Mu Shi. The children also liked it very much. This morning Mu Yangling followed Mu Shi into the mountain, and came back from the trap with 2 hares. One was kept for Malu to fry at night, and the remaining one, Mu Shi, wanted to throw away. It was frozen outside with snow, but Mu Yangling was asked to peel and clean it and make barbecue. There is no way, although the winter is short, there is nothing to do, and Xiao Bowen can't always read a book, so Mu Yangling set up the grill to barbecue. Speaking of kebabs, Mu Yangling still likes roe deer or venison the most, but unfortunately, it's cold and snowy now, they can't go too deep, and they can't track their prey. Mu Yangling was feeling sorry for his cousin and younger brother. Roasted venison is delicious in winter. When the weather turns sunny and warmer, my father and I will go to the mountains to hunt a deer and come back. Then we will roast venison for you to eat. The venison, put it on the baking tray, just rub a little sesame oil, sprinkle a little salt and chili, it's a pity, if there is cumin, just put a little bit, and bake until it's 7 ripe. Mu Yangling made an expression of enjoyment. As long as you eat it once, I can guarantee that you will never forget the taste. Xiao Bowen and Xiaolan's saliva flowed down. Xiao Bowen sucked his saliva, and asked anxiously, "Can I eat roasted venison?" "Of course, but you are weak and can't eat more. Dad should eat more." Mu Yangling chuckled, "I'll bring the baby to drink for Dad." Xiaolan and Xiao Bowen asked innocently, "What baby?" Just as Mu Yangling was about to speak, she was slapped on the head. Looking back, Mu Shi was standing behind her with a dark face. "Where did you know such nonsense at such a young age?" Mu Shi looked at his daughter with a dark face, "and taught your younger brothers and sisters badly." Mu Yangling touched his nose and admitted his mistake. "Father, I know I was wrong, and I will never dare again." But Mu Shi knew that she was just saying that, and she didn't care at all, and he became a little worried. His daughter seemed to be too precocious, and he didn't know who said these stupid words. It seems that next time he goes to town, he should not take her with him, lest it was broken by someone. Mu Shi said with a stern face, "From now on, don't listen to these stupid words again." Mu Yangling agreed honestly. Then Mu Shi snorted, took out the dagger, took out the remaining half of the rabbit, picked out the meat and put it on a plate. Ziyuheng, Xiaolan and Xiao Bowen excitedly took skewers to skewer meat, and Mu Yangling grilled them again. After a while, there were 20 skewers on the other side of the plate, and Mu Yangling stuffed a skewer into his mouth. The rest pushed it over and said, "Eat it while it's hot, otherwise it won't taste good when it's cold." Ziyuheng gave it to Mu Shi first, and Mu Shi took a bunch, saying, "Eat it, I'll try something new." Quickly picked the rabbit meat and put it on a plate, and said, "Don't be greedy, if you eat too much and get angry, I will have to make tea for you later." "Aling, you are a sister, take care of them." Mu Yang responded, sticking out his tongue after Mushi left, and said to the three of them, "Let's skewer it, eat half of it today, and bake the rest tomorrow." Mu Yangling stuffed 2 skewers into his mouth, filled his mouth with greasy food, and sighed with satisfaction, "The wild rabbits are fresh, fragrant, and sweet enough. The domestic rabbits I used to eat couldn't even match half of them." Ziyuheng was full of doubts. "Cousin, do you still use the rabbits you bought to eat? Can this rabbit be raised at home? How do you raise it?" I've eaten it before," Mu Yangling said vaguely. "This pig can be domesticated, and chickens can be domesticated. Why can't this rabbit be domesticated?" Ziyuheng thought about it carefully, nodded and said, "Cousin is right, I don't know much, maybe I haven't heard of it." Mu Yangling blinked, tilted his head and asked, "Haven't you heard that rabbits can be raised?" Ziyuheng shook her head, "I haven't heard of it, but I was thinking about how to raise rabbits. They can make holes, how can they survive?" She looked at Mu Yangling with sparkling eyes and asked, "Cousin, if rabbits can be raised, will our family be able to raise a few rabbits in the coming year, and then we can sell them when they are fattened up?" Hearing what Ziyuheng said, Mu Yangling really didn't know how to raise rabbits. Thinking that Mushi was well informed, he planned to ask him at night. Xiao Bowen and Xiaolan were not interested in this topic. They were grabbing a handful of meat skewers and eating them. When Mu Yangling came back to his senses, Xiao Bowen had already eaten 7 or 8 skewers, so she hurriedly stopped her. Okay, don't eat so much, or you won't be able to eat dinner at night, and Dad will beat me up." Xiao Bowen shouted, "I still want to eat, but you all still eat." Okay, let's not eat anymore." Mu Yangling knew that children are what other people do, so they can learn. Although they still want to eat, they can only press down and said, "Let's drink water first, and save the rest for my sister to bake for you tomorrow." Mushi went to Lu Daqian's house to discuss with him about building a house in Zishan village when the weather cleared up. Half of Ma's house was demolished. Now the weather is bad and they can't start construction, but they will go to help build it when the weather clears up. I have to buy some wood, and Fei Mushi will help out the materials first, but the weather does not know when it will clear up. Mushi let Malayashi live in Mu's house with peace of mind. The most important thing is that Malayashi lives in Mu's house, and Mushi and much more peace of mind. Xu Wanyang's due date is only about a month away. After all, Malu has experience, so she is more reliable than Mushi and Mu Yangling. Xu Wanyang took out the needle and thread to make a dress for the child in her stomach. Malu rushed to grab it when she saw it, and said, "You can't use the needle and thread, otherwise your eyes will be blurred in the future, and it will have a bad influence on the child." Malu looked at the half-made clothes in the basket, and said with a smile, "This dress is not difficult. Auntie can help you make it. If you embroider those things on it, I can't do it, but if you do it simply clothes, I am not inferior." Malu doesn't know how to embroider, but every woman knows how to sew clothes, and the clothes made for children generally don't have anything embroidered on them, as long as the stitches are fine and tight. Xu Wanyang said happily, "I saw the clothes my aunt made for Ziyuheng and the others. I really can't compare the stitches. I'm too happy to have you make clothes for the children." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 71. Mu Yangling took out a Chinese cabbage from the cellar. "Tonight we will eat stewed cabbage with vermicelli." Ziyuheng and Xiaolan clapped their hands and cheered. Bowen sniffed and said, "Put more vermicelli and less vegetables." Mu Yangling nodded his nose and said, "You think it's beautiful. There are not so many vermicelli at home." Little Bowen pouted and said, "Sis, you don't like vermicelli anyway, why don't you give me your portion and I'll give you the cabbage?" "Thank you, there is no shortage of cabbage at home." Xiao Bowen pouted, and Ziyuheng hurriedly said, "Cousin, I'll give you my share." "Ziyuheng, don't indulge him. We have to eat a balanced diet, so we can't just feed him vermicelli. We should feed him more vegetables and meat." Xiao Bowen pointed out unconvinced, "Then you and Dad don't like to eat vegetables, you always eat meat, you and Dad are also disobedient." Mu Yangling insisted, "Who said I don't like eating vegetables? Eating more vegetables will make you look beautiful, I eat vegetables every day." Xiao Bowen snorted and pointed out ruthlessly, "You only eat half a plate of meat to eat a chopstick's worth of vegetables. Mother told you to eat more green vegetables. You also said that eating green vegetables has no strength, and you are going to become a rabbit." Mu Yangling pretended to be stupid. "Did I say that?" Xiao Bowen nodded fiercely, "Yes." Ziyuheng and Xiaolin covered their mouths and smiled. Mu Yangling knew that if he continued, he would only be exposed more, so he stuck out his tongue and stopped talking about this topic, but said, "Go, I'll take you out to play." Mu Yangling took them to find Lu Lang and the others. The weather was cold, and no children in the village went out. They all stayed at home and roasted braziers, and the Lu family was the same. The whole family was sitting in the main room. Mrs. Lu Zhao and Mrs. Lu Zhang were doing work with needles and threads, while several children were playing with ropes on the kong with quilts wrapped around their quilts. Grandma Lu saw Mu Yangling and the children, busy waving, "A Ling is here, come in quickly, A Lang, A Rong, your cousin is here to play with you." He went to hold Ziyuheng and Xiaolin's hands again, and saw that their hands were frozen and were rubbing yellow medicine, so he said pitifully, "Poor child, why is it so cold? Auntie and Grandma have some ointment here, I will give it to you later, take it, go back and wipe it off." Lu Rong also slid down the kong, and ran over to hold Ziyuheng's hand. "Cousin, let's get on the kong, it's cold out there." Seeing that her cousin was enthusiastic about the pair of sisters, Lu Yun snorted disdainfully, picked out her belongings from a large pile of things and put them away, watching them vigilantly to prevent them from stealing them. No one noticed her little thoughts. Xiao Bowen had already thrown off his shoes and climbed onto the bed, and Mu Yangling was busy taking care of him. Mrs. Lu and Zhang saw that the sisters were all wearing old cotton padded clothes, so she took advantage of the time to go up to support them and touched them. The cotton wool was soft and felt good. The two children of Ma's family can't even afford to eat, so how can they afford cotton padded clothes? And it's not new. When the person came that day, she saw it from a distance. The clothes were full of patches. If there were such good cotton clothes, why wouldn't she not wear them when driving the mountain road? It is even more impossible to buy new ones. Who buys cotton padded clothes? Not new ones, but half new ones that are not old. Mostly Mu Yangling's old clothes, right? Mrs. Lu and Zhang feel a little uncomfortable. They are all relatives of hers. Their family is still in the same village. Mu Bowen comes here to play here every now and then. What's more, this is her grandmother's natal family, and that is just her aunt's house, and it doesn't even matter if they are close or distant. The same goes for the Shu family. Her daughter is ignorant and doesn't teach, she just indulges blindly. After Lu Zhang touched Ziyuheng's clothes, her face was not good looking. She is not a person with deep scheming, so her face was brought out. Ziyuheng is sensitive, and when she felt Lu Zhang's disgust, her heart moved. She pulled back her hand, smoothed her clothes, turned around and pulled her younger sister, and smiled at Mrs. Lu and Zhang. "Hello, second cousin." Mrs. Lu and Zhang smiled stiffly, glanced at the cotton-padded clothes on the two sisters, and couldn't help asking, "Ziyuheng, where did you buy the cotton-padded clothes you were wearing?" "Cousins, buy one." The smile on Ziyuheng's face was even wider, and she said with a smile, "I didn't buy this, it was given to us by cousin Aling, and it was only worn for one season, because cousin Aling is growing fast, so I can't wear it anymore." When Mrs. Lu and Zhang heard this, She took the opportunity to turn her head and said to Mu Yangling, "Aling, do you still have any old clothes? If you have any, give one to your cousins, otherwise they won't be able to go out this whole winter. The door is open." Mu Yangling was taken aback. If this was for Lu Yun and the others, then Lu Rong and Lu Lun would also give it. The second uncle also had cousins. How could she have so many old clothes? Moreover, in the past few days, she found out all the clothes she could wear and gave them to Malayashi, asking her to change the clothes into those that Ziyuheng and Ziyulan could wear. Ziyuheng was also taken aback. She just wanted to show off that she was close to cousin Aling, and stabbed the cousin's aunt in the eye, but she didn't expect her to be so thick-skinned that she begged for something directly. She felt that she had gotten into trouble and couldn't let her cousin face it, so she rushed in front of Mu Yangling and said, "Auntie, cousins don't have any clothes to wear? Why don't I go back and get some, cousin Alings? The clothes have only been worn for one season. My cousin originally wanted to use 2 pieces to make them bigger and then wear them for my cousin. My cousin saw that our sisters had no clothes to wear, so she changed them for us. Since my cousin and cousin don't have any, then when I go back, I will tell my aunt and grandma, and I will change 2 pieces for them as well. After all," he bowed his head shyly, "I just don't know if it's enough." When Grandma Lu heard that Mrs. Lu and Zhang asked for clothes from a child, she turned cold immediately, glared at her, pulled Ziyuheng towards her, and said, "Good boy, don't listen to your cousin, come here and warm up with your uncle. The clothes are as thin as summer clothes. I can't make new ones at home, so I'm not allowed to ask for 2, Mrs. Lu and Zhang muttered, but the voice was so loud that everyone in the room could hear them. Grandma Lu stared at her angrily. Mrs. Lu Zhao hurriedly stepped forward to tease her younger siblings, and smiled flatly at Grandma Lu, "Mother, younger siblings are sleepy. I'll take her out to wake up." She went out. Mu Yangling pulled Sister Ziyuheng to sit by the brazier, and seemed to have not heard what Mrs. Lu and Zhang said just now. Mrs. Lu Zhao pulled Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Zhang out, and scolded, "The clothes belong to Aling, and she can give them to whomever she wants. It's not like you don't know, the family doesn't want to owe the Mu family too much. Why are you still rushing? Go and ask for it." Thanks to the eunuch being in the house, if you hear those words, you will suffer. Mrs. Lu and Zhang said in disbelief, "I owe it if I don't want to. What's more, we are her uncle's family, and the Ma's family is just her aunt's family. How can we treat their family as if we are closer to our family?" Mrs. Lu and Zhang married early, but she knew why, but she was not good at commenting on the affairs of the older generation, so she just said vaguely, "They are all the same family, how can there be any difference?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 72. In terms of closeness, the father-in-law may not be better than the eldest aunt. Lu Zaishi knows that the younger aunt was brought up by the eldest aunt, and she was by her side to take care of Xu Wanyang when she was in labor. This kind of affection is irreplaceable by others. Seeing that her siblings didn't listen, Mrs. Lu Zhao said, "Just ask for it. Aling is not a person who can't save face. If you really want to annoy her, she dares to choke even in front of her father-in-law. She doesn't speak now but just reads. In the face of your being her aunt, if this lawsuit is brought before father-in-law, even Lu Zhuang will be assigned. Lu Zhuang's temper is a bit fiery. If it's because she was taught a lesson by her father-in-law, she must be in a hurry to go home." Although Lu Zhang's face is still not good looking, but after all, he dare not bring up this topic again. Ziyuheng in the room was also a little uneasy, so Mu Yangling patted her hand to comfort her. Seeing that the atmosphere in the room was a bit weird, Lu Lang rolled his eyes, leaned up to Mu Yangling and asked, "Cousin, in a few days, let's go to Shanao to eat barbecue, just us, don't bring others." Mrs. Lu and Zhang, who entered the room, heard the words, thinking that Lu Lang was going to take out the bacon at home, so she hurriedly said, The barbecue is smoky, and it gets angry. How can it be delicious when cooked? Alung, you don't spoil the good things at home. Luzayashi was a little displeased, and said, Alan didn't say that he wanted the bacon at home. In the past, Ayun and the others also ate so much barbecue with Aling. Why didn't they say that getting angry is not good? Mu Yangling said lightly, don't worry, my second cousin, I still have meat at home, and I use my family's meat. Mrs. Lu and Zhang said a little embarrassingly, although your meat is not very expensive, don't take it out to eat and play. It's not good to go into the mountains now because of the cold weather. Auntie, we never use bacon in our barbecue. We always use fresh meat, which is delicious, Lu Lang shouted. Just a few of us, don't call anyone else. Xiao Bowen took the opportunity to say, we must call Gauden. Gauden is Xiao Bowen's best friend, Lu Lang nodded and said, there must be that kid, don't worry, there are cousins, just us. Then he said to Ziyuheng Xiaolan, let me tell you, don't look at Aling's cooking skills as mediocre, this barbecue is a must, even my cousin can't compare to it. Ziyuheng grinned, I know, we already ate the rabbit roasted by my cousin. Lu Lang suddenly became jealous. The two sisters lived with Aling. After that, when Aling had any delicious food, they and Bowen would be the first to eat. Thinking about it before, Aling had delicious food, and after giving it to Bowen, they were brothers, but now the treatment has been lowered. Ziyuheng saw his jealousy and raised her head proudly. Lu Lun snorted angrily when he saw it, squeezed to Mu Yangling's side, and looked at her eagerly, ah, cousin, let's go to Shanao tomorrow, shall we? Lu Rong, Lu Yang, and Lu Yun all looked at Mu Yangling eagerly. Mu Yangling waved his hand and said, I'll go into the mountain tomorrow to have a look. If there's something in the trap, we'll go there. If there's nothing, forget it. Several people immediately cheered, and the strange atmosphere just now disappeared with a smile, and a smile appeared on Grandma Liu's face. Mu Yangling and Ziyuheng also quickly put the unhappiness behind them, and left home after playing at Liu's house for a long time. Mrs. Malu had already prepared the meals. When she saw them coming back, she waved and smiled, there is still a soup. I also said that if you don't come back, I will ask your father to call you. Go wash your hands and go back to the room and sit down. It's time to eat. Xu Wanyang was lighting a fire for Malayashi in the kitchen. Since Malayashi came, she didn't have to cook, and she didn't even need to do many housework, Malayashi always rushed to do it. Xu Wanyang didn't get used to it for 2 days. Seeing that she was uneasy after being rejected, she knew that she was uneasy because she was dependent on others, so she let her do it, and usually gave her a helping hand. Over the past few days, the relationship between the two has been fixed. Malu is uneasy, but Xu Wanyang respects Malu as her mother-in-law. First, her mother-in-law was brought up by Malu, and second, when she gave birth to her daughter, she was the one who was there to cheer her up. The daughter was unwilling to breastfeed after birth, and she also took care of her, taught them to feed them with rice soup, and served her for 3 days of confinement. Mu Yangling didn't know that Xu Wanyang had thought so much. When she saw a plate of braised rabbit meat on the table, her saliva was almost drooling. If she didn't want to set an example for her younger brothers and sisters, she would definitely pick up a piece and try it first. Ziyuheng and the others were also greedy for meat, sitting on the table eagerly waiting for the last soup. Malayashi brought out the soup, and seeing their eagerness, he smiled and said, I know you are hungry, eat quickly, today's braised pot is full, enough for you to eat. Xu Wanyang took a look at the braised rabbit meat and felt that it was greasy, so she hurriedly shifted her gaze to other places, and said happily, it's a good thing our family is a hunter, otherwise how could we afford to support these 2 children? Mu Shi is fond of meat, and Mu Yangling's appetite is exactly like her father's. She looks small, but eats a lot. There are 3 bowls of rice for lunch and dinner, a big pot of meat, and vegetables. Although she always only eats a few chopsticks, she must have them. Bowen seems to like eating vegetables more, but that is compared with his father and sister, and compared with people outside, this kid is also very cruel to eat meat. If these two children were to be born in other people's homes, they would really not be able to support them. Only the Mew family can guarantee enough meat every day. It's a blessing to be able to eat. Malu looked at them with a smile. Eat a lot now, grow stronger, and then have more strength and skills than others. Strength and industry are everything to a farmer. Do you think Shishi is more promising than others now? That's because he is strong and strong. Malu turned to look at the two granddaughters and said, I only hope that they can have half of Aling's ability in the future enough. Mu Yangling mumbled while eating, don't worry, Auntie, the cousins are clever and handy, and they must be more promising than me. At this time, the atmosphere in the Lu family was a little stagnant. During the day, Grandma Lu didn't care too much because of Mu Yangling and others. Now that there are only her own family members left in the house, she doesn't have to worry about other people's face. First, she scolded Mrs. Lu and Zhang, and finally said, don't think I don't know your little thoughts, you'd better put them all away. Our Lu family owes the Mu family, and the entire Linshan village owes the Mu family. If you let me know that you and Aling talk about these nonsense, you go directly to your mother's house. Lu Zhang's complexion changed, and he was driven back to her natal family, which was a great shame and humiliation.